Hey, it's your girl Geaux Queen with the Q Chat podcast. Thank you for tuning in to our latest episode. Before we get started, I want to give you some information on how you can grab some Q Chat merchandise. Go to www.goqueen.com and there you can purchase any Q Chat merchandise or any of my Go Love Yourself tees. So go ahead, take a look at the website and feel free to grab some merchandise today. There's something else I want to fill you guys in on. If you haven't heard, Anchor is the hottest and easiest way to make a podcast. It's the best price in the world, free. So go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And just remember, Anchor distributes your podcast to all streaming platforms. It's super simple. So go ahead and sit back and get ready to listen to the next episode of the Q Chat. But don't forget, go to www.goqueen.com and grab some merchandise. Thank you for tuning in and get ready to listen in. Go Queen! Hey. So we're recording a new episode of the Q Chat. As I mentioned, everyone that's listening, I'm dedicating the month of June to my Black Kings. I know this is Go Queen, but the Queen's job is to protect the King, and I'm giving my Kings the floor this month. It's imperative. I had to do it. This is my dedication to Mr. George Floyd and all these brothers that we have lost. I want to give my Kings the floor. So today, I have Mr. Damien Harmon, a.k.a. Damien Dash. We connected through IG, and he is a licensed mental health advocate, and he's out of North Carolina. He's a licensed clinical mental health counselor. Let me clarify that. And so I want to have a conversation with Mr. Damien. I know this is a crazy time right now, and I just wanted to get his perspective. Everyone that listens knows that I talk about mental health a lot. So I wanted to get that perspective from, my Black King, from the Black males. What are you guys dealing with? So I want to give Mr. Damien the floor to introduce himself. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, definitely. I'm
So
feeling good.
good. So start off by just letting people know your background. How long have you been working in the mental health field?
I've actually been in the field over 15 years in the mental health field. I've been a licensed therapist since 2012, so I'm 8 years in doing that. Definitely started out doing lower level mental health services, from case management to community-based services, and then kind of felt like that was a glass ceiling. So, I went back to school in 2009 to get my master's and became licensed at the end of 2011. So I've been practicing, in private practice, contract work, and actually, advocacy, since 2012.
What made you decide to go into the field?
Oh, that's a good question. I've actually, while I was doing more of the mental health case management side and the community-based services, I saw that there was a huge gap in the cultural competency and people that look like us
Right.
in the field. Very few Black males work in this field, and still presently we're a small percentage of active professional counselors, workers in the mental health field. Is predominantly, a Caucasian female that you will see as a social worker, or a therapist or a psychiatrist. Is usually Caucasian, or, there are a lot of Black females or African American females that are in the field. But we're known, Black male therapists, we're known as purple unicorns in this field because there are not too many of us, and there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of things in our neighborhoods and in our communities that we often struggle with, and one of those things is trusting, the healthcare system,
Right?
Because a lot of those individuals that's in the healthcare system are Caucasian, and that could go all the way back to the Tuskegee experiment and just the overall mistrust with medical professionals. So I saw that, and I actually had a role model, a mentor that was a Black psychologist, and I've never seen a Black male psychologist ever in my life. And when I started working in this field, his name is Dr. Kendall Jasper. shout out to him. He's on IG as well. But he brought a different swag um, and confidence to the profession, and he made me comfortable with just being myself, but also having the expertise and the educational backing to be an effective therapist. So he kind of persuaded me to get my license and become a therapist and reach for higher heights in that manner, and just to understand the underlying issues that lead to some of the behavioral issues that a lot of young kids and at-risk youth experience, as well as our adults. Because at some point in time, we've all experienced trauma or some type of dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
that leads to, substance use, increase incarceration, single family homes, things like that. There are always precipitating events and emotional or trauma dysfunction that impacts that. So I wanted to kind of further study that and become more proficient in that. So that was kind of like why I became a therapist.
I'm glad you just hit something that I mentioned a lot in my previous show. So I've had William Poole, actually, the first male guest I had this month, and we did two parts actually. He talked very in depth about his addiction matters. And he
Hmm.
had some trauma, some very serious trauma as a child. And when he mentioned it, I told him I realized that there's a common thread. Like I've had women on the show, I've even talked about, past issues I've had with abuse, that there's a common thread with people like you mentioned that have unfortunately experienced some level of trauma as a child, and the ways
Hmm.
in which we all cope with that as an adult can go in so many different directions. So
Hmm.
I'm happy you said that, and that's also, I feel like, a common thread in the African American community. Like some of us may numb that through drugs, some of us may numb that through just a pattern of repeating some toxic behaviors as we become adults. And I feel like therapy in general is something that I feel like it's still like riding the fence in the African American community, because we were all taught to pray things away. And I'm not knocking that,
Hmm.
of course not, but I feel like we unfortunately don't have the same comfort level in saying, hey, I need therapy, or hey, I'm in therapy. I feel like sometimes we tend to have like a shame involved in that, which is a stigma that we need to break out of. Do you feel that, as African American male therapist, as you mentioned, that is like, a position where it's like a unicorn type status. I feel like a lot of positions, unfortunately, just having a black male is always a rarity. Like even nowadays, even having a black male teacher is still something I feel like we need more of. So, do you
Hmm.
feel like, with your experience and your background as a therapist, do you feel like, and obviously, we're trying to keep the topic with regarding men in this subject, this episode, do you feel like there's a stigma regarding black men receiving any type of mental health care? Because I feel like there's a stigma as a whole in African American communities, men and women. But do you feel like particularly there's a stigma regarding black men receiving medical health care for their mental issues, or just addressing things?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. Fortunately, over the past few years, I've seen an increase. I definitely have more adult men that come in for therapy, to address issues, whether that stems from relationships to, just childhood trauma, or even if they were court mandated, they still came, they still showed up. So I've definitely seen an increase, which is a positive.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, to answer your question, I still feel that there's a stigma associated with it, due to the fact that a lot of men, and more African American men per se, we struggle in regards to our ego,
Mm.
and asking someone for help is somewhat a blow to your egos, because when we grow up, as children, especially boys, we're taught pretty much we're not supposed to show fear or have fear for anything or show sadness. And that's two of the basic four emotions that we have. We have happy, mad, sad, and fear. Those are our four basic emotions. And when you're taught to cut off two of those basic emotions, it causes a miscommunication, with your brain and what you're feeling, and that automatically puts a wall up, because the level of vulnerability that you have to have and transparency that you have to have in therapy in order for it to be effective. A lot of us are not taught that growing up. We're taught to man up, wipe the
Mm-hmm.
tears, don't cry, don't fear anything but God,
Right.
and it's totally the opposite. Like we do have fears. We do get sad, and more often than not, when we do have one of those two things, it's usually shown in anger. That's the
Mm.
only one besides happiness that is available to us, and that's what society allows us to show. In a sense, we can show you how angry we are. We can fuss, we can cuss, we can, punch things or just go off. But when we express sadness, it's shown as like a sign of weakness. And when we're, perceived as being weak, that means we can be taken advantage of, which is another strike to your ego. And no one wants to be taken advantage of. And so I teach a lot of my clients that, exhibiting vulnerability and being transparent is the strongest you can get. It's kind of like giving someone a blueprint or a playbook of yourself. I'm like, here, this is my blueprint. This is who I am. I'm giving you this particular thing that I hold near and dear to me. And what you choose to do with it is totally on you, but I'm still going to be okay because I'm being me and I'm being sincere within that. So trying to change that thought process, is one of those things that in therapy helps men to kind of understand, it's okay to express, it's okay to feel. it,
Mm.
it it's about how do you respond to those particular situations. And a lot of men often struggle, especially in relationships, when they get with their partner, and their partner is saying, well, he never talks to me, I don't know how he's feeling, all I know is anger or when he's happy. And we often, consider like our depression moments, or when we're fearful of something, we'll say that we're stressed out. We never really identifying the true underlying feeling. It's okay to be stressed. When we show that fairly well, but it's more so underlining up under that. It may be hurt, it may be sadness, it may be whatever the case may be, and going through therapy and understanding those things will allow them to identify their emotions more specifically so we can address that particular issue. But as long as we keep a blanket over it, we're just, addressing surface issues. But I like to get to the core
Mm-hmm.
uh, of your emotion, your thought process, how you feel and how you behave. Like all of those are interconnected. How you think about a particular situation brings along an emotion, and that emotion often drives you to do a certain type of behavior or have a behavioral response. So all those things have to be connected, and when they're not connected, it's almost like I'm saying that I'm good, but you can almost tell someone when they're not good, or
Mm.
they're when they're off. And if you know that person, you know that they're not good, you know that they're upset about something, you know that they're depressed about something. But we're so okay with just saying that we're okay,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't feel like no one would understand it, or that our feelings would not be validated or supported. So they would rather just withdraw and, like you said previously, learn negative coping skills, whether that's drinking it away, smoking it away,
Mm-hmm.
sexing it away, doing anything that's going to numb that pain.
Right.
And then it's a continuous cycle. You numb it, then it comes right back because you're not resolving the actual issue or the underlying issue that's causing that pain. You're just putting a band-aid on it for it temporarily.
Correct. And I use this analogy all the time. I feel like when we find numbing mechanisms to cope with things, all we're doing is putting a band-aid over a bullet wound. Like it's not
Hmm.
doing anything. It's just
Right,
covering up things, but you'll never have any peace, when you do that.
right,
And
right.
unfortunately, I feel like that's the whole stigma just African Americans in general with therapy. But I know, like what you mentioned, I definitely can see that completely, specifically with Black men, unfortunately, because it feels like you guys get Black women, we already have pressure, but a Black man has like a different level of pressure that we, wouldn't even want, quite frankly. You got to
Mm-hmm.
deal with society on top of everything that we have to deal with as African Americans alone, which is insane. It's just too much pressure in general. So obviously, we all know what's happening in the state of the world right now. It's just, as African Americans, of course, we already know what is taking place in the world. We're born into a world where we know, unfortunately, what we have to face as African Americans, racism, discrimination, how it's manifested basically in different ways. But obviously, with everything that's happened with George Floyd, obviously, we as African Americans, we all know this didn't start with him, but it seems like for whatever reason, I guess maybe the severity of the video, it's obviously just taken over in other races. Obviously, we're having these protests, things of that nature, but more videos obviously are surfacing, more cases are being talked about of Black men
Right.
being killed. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a Black male, and this is the thing I think that is the most heartbreaking, for all of us that just really sat down and just thought about this deeper. Already in the community, Black males are already, public enemy number one in a sense. You already have to worry about within the community, fighting for your life and not falling in the stereotypes and not losing your life. But
Mm-hmm.
now we realize just the severity, just the weight, I think, that Black men have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with. You have to deal with that aspect, but then you
Mm-hmm.
also have to deal with the world in general that will only see the color of your skin. And they not only do they just see the color of your skin, but they also see it in a negative way. So, and this is just so hard to process, but just as a Black male, and obviously, you have training in just dealing with mental health issues. Right now, I mean, I think everybody's anxiety is just high, so
Mm-hmm.
from your perspective, as a Black male and as an actual licensed mental health counselor, what is your perspective just on how is it even possible? And this may be like a crazy question, but how is it possible just to simply cope with everything that's going on right now? Because, like I said, I know a lot of people's anxieties are being heightened, but
Right.
I can only imagine in your position, already there's already extra anxiety, I would assume that our brothers already have. So, what is your perspective just on how to cope right now? Because there may be some men that may listen into this, and who knows, they may be having some heightened anxieties and they're trying
Right.
to numb it away, or they just may not know how to cope with it. So, just
Mm-hmm.
what's your perspective just on how to cope right now in this moment? And I know that
Right.
may be a crazy question, but like,
No, it's not a crazy question, and that's as a therapist, that's kind of like not part of my vocabulary to say crazy
oh,
because
sorry.
yeah, that's a stigma situation right there. So
Right, right.
no, but that's just me.
Hmm.
But it's definitely not a crazy question. Just to kind of, I guess maybe back up a little bit to kind of address all of that within one response. I honestly feel that, and this has always been my thing, to kind of find the positive in any negative situation. And I really feel like this pandemic and being quarantined has allowed people to slow down because we are constantly on the go and we really don't recognize how fast we're going, because we're doing this, we're parents, we're workers, we're socialites, and we got to figure out what we're going to do this weekend and traveling and all these different things. So with this pandemic happening and you have to stay at home and quarantine, there's a lot of time to kind of be within yourself. So there's a lot of reflection. There's a lot of creativity as well. And because we were going through that transition, that adjustment of, I guess, a new normal, that kind of highlighted a lot of different things. And one of those things was the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Arbery, all of those things. And I think it
Hmm.
came to a head, with George Floyd. And it was just like, everybody was just completely drained. We were tired. You
Right.
know, it wasn't, it was a sense of anger, but it was more so, you know, we're tired in a sense, like all these things happening all at once. You know, we're having to change the way that we live, the change that we operate, and now this. So in that 3 month span from March or whenever the quarantine started, everybody was in this transitional phase, or what we call adjustment phase, where your emotions are impacted.
Mm.
Whether that you become a little bit more depressed, I've definitely seen, you know, more clients being depressed and or anxious because it's a fear of the unknown. That's what anxiety is. It's a fear of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. So you have automatic negative thoughts that kind of gear your emotions. And like I said previously, your thoughts, you know, your feelings are controlled by your thoughts. So if you're having negative thoughts, you're only going to have negative emotions attached to that, which means you're going to respond in a negative way, whether that's depression, anger, you know, frustration, whatever the case may be, lack of sleep, you know, changes in appetite, things like that. But to answer your question, for men, and I've spoke on this over the last 3 months for sure, but just the overall adjustment and understanding, one, what you can and cannot control. You know, you can't control outside forces, can't control society, you know, whatever is going on, but you can control how the way that you respond to it. So I'm really big, and this is just from a personal perspective as well as a clinical perspective, um, finding a routine that works for you. You know, with being at home, some people are, you know, losing jobs or having to work from home, and they're used to being out socializing and being out in the community 8 to 10 hours a day. And now you're at home 24 hours a day. So there's an adjustment with that. So finding that new normal and a routine that you can stick to, whether that's you waking up at 7 o'clock like you normally would do, going to work to be at 8, like still doing those things, or replacing that with something positive, whether that's, you know, working out, going for a walk in the neighborhood. One thing that I definitely am a huge proponent of is getting that vitamin D, like going outside, you know, and just feeling the sun and allowing yourself to feel, you know, and the sun. I'm a huge proponent of that because it reduces anxiety and depression, just vitamin D overall. So
Mm.
sometimes just being outside helps that. Walking, exercising, meditation. For those that don't, you know, necessarily subscribe to those particular things, making sure that you do something for yourself daily that's positive for you, whether that's your favorite hobby or listening to your favorite type of music. Um, Things simple as that, or getting you some ice cream and just enjoying that moment and trying to be in the present, and not focusing on what has been or what could possibly be, but being more in the present. That's also a really good coping strategy. Another thing that I do recommend is that we take this time to actually spend time with our families, you know, because we've been moving and shaking so long, and we got used to that routine, and now everything's kind of slowed down. You know, take the time to actually check in with your family members, make phone calls. I see a lot of Zoom things. I'm loving the TikTok videos with the families, you know, dancing and doing those things and spending that quality family time together, because we've lost track of that. And that's one of those positive things that I got out of a negative situation, is my ability to reconnect with family members that I may have lost touch with, because, you know, with the pandemic, people were dying and still are dying left and right, and you can't grieve properly because you can't say your final goodbyes, you can't do funerals, and you can't go visit them at the hospital and things like that. So being in the present and taking time to check in with your children and reestablishing those healthy relationships helps you from a mental health perspective. So it's a lot of things. Definitely, I'm always a proponent of going to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just to deal with the adjustment and for the longest time, a lot of people thought that if you went to therapy, that you were crazy or something was wrong with you. And
Right.
for me, I look at therapy as personal growth. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're the only constant thing in life is change, and we're constantly changing. So as we progress through life, there are certain situations and certain things that we deal with that we've never encountered before, and we may need a unbiased and non-judgmental perspective to kind of give us clarity on this one perspective or multiple perspectives, because there are a million ways to look at one situation, and sometimes based on our experiences and what we've dealt with in the past, we automatically bring those to the forefront. Well, I experienced it this way previously, it's going to happen like this again, instead of looking at that situation as one isolated situation. So I'm always a huge proponent of going to therapy just from a progressive standpoint, and becoming a better person overall. So that's always my go-to. But if you can't get to a therapist, or you're not ready for therapy, because a lot of people are not ready to be as vulnerable and transparent in their emotions, and so until you get to that particular point, do the things that you can control. Working out is big for men. If you can't get to a gym, do your push-ups, do your sit-ups, things like that on a regular basis. Eating healthy. This whole pandemic, I've seen people, gain a few pounds, and
Mm-hmm.
because you're at home all day, you're eating snacks, and and your red Kool-Aids, which I'm not knocking, because I do, suck on it every now and then, but those things are really important to your mental health. It's mind, body, and soul. So being able to reconnect with yourself from a soul standpoint, from a holistic standpoint, but also, watching what you eat, watching what you digest, both from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint, because things like social media, if you're scrolling all day, every day, and you're looking at videos of George Floyd and all these different things that can impact you negatively, that's what you're digesting, and that's what you're going to feel, that transference of that energy from those videos, the sadness, the hurt, the anger, all those things can impact you overall from a long term perspective. So just I know I said a lot, but
No.
definitely, watching what you eat, making sure we're, eating healthier, because especially black men, like we're the highest up there. We have the shortest life expectancy. So
Right.
we need to change the way that we eat, change the way that we live. And because all those things are connected, if we're eating right and we're living right and we're having a healthy life, I'm not saying being a total vegan or whatever the case may be, but um,
Mm-hmm.
just changing the way that we eat and being more conscious of the things that we take in from a food standpoint, from a mental standpoint, and even in relationships and things like that. Removing toxic situations out of your life will improve your mental health. So I guess that I hope that answered your question.
Oh, definitely. And you brought up a lot of good points. I mean, a ton of them. But do you think, I know, like me personally, for example, I can't watch the video. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm angry, but I just won't watch. Like, I didn't watch the full thing. Like, I cannot watch someone's death regardless, and
Right.
I feel like I still have the same level of pain regarding this. But
Mm-hmm.
I just have a strange feeling about viewing that, because I don't feel like it's right to view. I'm not knocking anyone that watch it. I'm just saying, for me personally, I can't.
Right.
But I know I had been kind of numb to the whole situation, like at first, like when they started, doing all the protests and things of that nature. I mean, because like I said, this is racism is something that we know 365 days a year.
Right.
But recently, some of my friends started, and social media, like I said, is the devil. Sometimes it's like I had to like really purge myself from Facebook when the
Right.
pandemic got crazy, because I was
Right.
getting so annoyed with certain people's posts. And I feel like once the protest started, I remember inboxing one of my friends. I said, it's starting again. I said, now we got the people that's just flooding social media with things that are not, that doing more hurt than helping. And some of my friends, which this was something I felt was therapeutic to a degree, started sharing some stories of past racial incidents that they had been through.
Hmm.
And I even shared one, but then I started reading some more of my friends' posts. Now, mind you, these are my close friends, but the posts were heartbreaking. And
Right.
then I felt like, okay, my PTSD is starting to get triggered because, like,
Yeah.
I'm reading it and I'm like, whoa. Like, yesterday, I literally had to have a moment because I'm like, okay, this has triggered my PTSD and anxiety because I'm reading these stories and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I can't really deal with this too much today. Do you think, in general, just right now, just like for example, like me and my friends, like we started recalling incidents. One of my friends recalled an incident when she was called the N word by her neighbor when she was 8 years old. Mind you, we're all in our 40s.
Right.
Do you feel like things that are taking place now, and even with the pandemic, I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic because we're all coping with that, and now this has happened. Do you
Hmm.
feel like a lot of us may just maybe possibly suffering from a level of PTSD, like all of us in a sense? I kind of felt like when everyone was recalling these stories, things that happened decades ago, that it was a form of PTSD. Do you think that a lot of us may possibly be coping, I mean, dealing with PTSD, because a lot of us are recalling bad stories and, it's
Right.
triggering our anxiety. And as you mentioned, it can trigger depression. The pandemic alone, I feel, cause just anxiety and depression, not with everyone, but because it was hard to cope with, it
Right.
still is. But do you feel like just right now, especially with all the racial tension, that a lot of African Americans may possibly just be suffering from PTSD in general, like when we just recall things that we experienced negatively, in the past?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I definitely feel like a lot of people have been living with PTSD, and there are different levels of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
But just the re-triggering of thoughts and the emotional irregulation that comes along with that when you're triggered by something, or if you watch something that's related to slaves being beaten, or watching the Rodney King beating, all these things, lynchings, that exposure is what we call secondary trauma. You may not have, physically encountered it directly, but the point of seeing it over and over is traumatizing, because you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting yourself in that situation because it's happening to someone that looks like you, and it's directed to a specific population. So the way that we maneuver, throughout our lives, it's very related to PTSD. And some people get treated for it. And like I said, we're the most, our culture is based around, a lot of substance use and a lot of abuse overall, just from generational trauma that's been passed down, from generation to generation. And we pick up certain things, as far as us being abused, us being beaten, by our parents because their parents beat them, and so on and so forth. And if you trace
Mm-hmm.
it all the way back, that comes from, the slave time and slavery.
Yes, I say that all the time. That's exactly where it stems from.
So just that alone, and just understanding where we come from in our, um, I guess, our migration here, if you want to call it, all those things are traumatic for us. And when it's not discussed and it's not openly expressed, and we kind of consume those emotions and we keep it on the inside, it's going to come out. That's the thing with negative emotions. It's not built for us to keep it inside. And that's why we have these responses that we have. Not everyone is going to have, panic. No, not everyone's going to have a panic attack or anxiety attack. It may be more so of lashing out, becoming defiant, being combative, like going against authority. All of those different things are a representation or some of the subsets within PTSD. So I definitely totally agree that a lot of us do have PTSD, and just being able to talk about it now and being able to have it on the forefront as mental health is continuing to progress, for whatever reason, whether that's because celebrities are behind and they're more open about it, and because we live in a society where we kind of follow trends. I'm glad
Right.
that it's a trendy thing right now. Actually, Dr. Kendall Jasper, he was on my show, and he said mental health right now is sexy. Sexy in a sense that it's being consumed, and people are starting to understand it, and people are starting to relate to it because you have celebrities talking about it, and it's on television, and it's trying to become normalized in a sense, which is a great thing. And at the same time, because it is being normalized, people say, well, I have something, but I'm still not going to necessarily get the treatment for it. I'm just going to recognize that I do have something, or something that's off a little bit, but I'm not going to get the treatment that's needed because of that stigma. The stigma is still there, although the resources are available. I wish that they were more readily available, especially in lower socioeconomic, populations. Black culture, African American type of communities, we're the ones that kind of need it the most, and we're the less resourceful in those particular areas. And a lot of people feel like there are a lot of barriers in regards to accessing treatment, whether that's from the financial aspect of it or the distance or things like that. There are a lot of different barriers outside of just stigma. That's a contributing factor, but there are other factors that kind of impact us from getting the necessary treatment that we need. So one of the things that I've decided to do, especially with my platform, is to raise awareness, by reducing the stigma, and saying that everybody has mental health issues, and it's whether it's mild or severe, we all get depressed at some point in time, we all get anxious, but again, it's how we deal with it. And making the couch, I wanted to kind of help continue to normalize it a little bit, but also make it a cool and relaxing environment. You know, I call myself, like, one of my monikers is not your average therapist, because I don't look like your prototypical therapist. I'm not going to wear a
Mm-hmm.
button up and slacks and all those things and have on glasses and have my legs crossed and taking notes. You know, I have two full tattoo sleeves, and I look like a guy from around the way that's on the block. But
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of my clients are able to identify with that, which means they're more comfortable. And when you're more
Right.
comfortable, you're a little bit more accessible emotionally, and able to kind of express yourself without the fear of judgment or the fear that I won't understand, because I've definitely been there. Grew up in, a rough neighborhood, and,
Mm-hmm.
seen things as well. So all of those things contribute to that, and my hope and wish is for us to kind of say, okay, like, I'm okay, but it's okay
Mm.
not to be okay. When you're not okay, be able to express that, and be okay with that, and be able to stand firm in that.
I think there's several layers to why, our community really doesn't embrace therapy the way that they should. I think number one, and I had like a past guest, like I said, we talk about mental health so much on my show. Like, I just feel like it's important to have that conversation. So, one of my past guests, we were just talking about mental health, and we mentioned just the whole label of crazy, how it's so negative, and where did that even stem from in the first place? If
Mm-hmm.
someone's having issues, or if someone's dealing with depression, or if someone has episodes of anything, the first label that people go to is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that you mentioned, I think, which is another reason we tend to stray away from it. When I say we, I just mean, just our race as a whole. Doesn't
Right.
mean everyone, that's listening. But
Right.
just how you mentioned how you're relatable. Like, if, someone were to go to you, they'll see that you look like you're from around the way. But I think, just like you mentioned, I think in our mind, some of us think that the therapist is like, this white person sitting there, with the glasses on and the cardigan sweater, and the
Right.
cat on the sofa,
Right.
judging, and who cannot relate to anything, that we have experienced. So I think that's another thing that kind of makes people fearful. I think one of the third thing is, I think And if someone disagrees with me, you can easily inbox me, email me, whatever. I think with African Americans, we're so quick to shield our business, air quotes. I'm not telling everybody my business,
Right.
like we just,
Right.
which when in actuality, therapy is the most private thing ever. But I
Right.
just think that we also have been conditioned that sharing anything,
Hmm.
it's telling people your business. And God forbid, we share anything about our childhood. Our parents really instill that in us, that what goes on in the household is our business. Like, we don't
Exactly.
share it with anyone. So I think that's another thing. And I think sometimes when we've also experienced some trauma that may be related to some family members, we
Hmm.
kind of feel like we're betraying them
Hmm.
by even discussing things that have happened. So I think there's a lot of layers. And I think the greatest thing would be, for us to wash away that stigma, because a lot of us really are hurting and we really do need professional help. And it doesn't make you a weak person, doesn't make you quote unquote crazy. It just means that you're seeking solace and you're trying to be whole, and there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. But I think when we fully get to that stage, I think it would obviously make us all better. One thing, as I mentioned, on your IG profile, you have this awesome video where you were discussing what is the black man's value. Because, like I said, I'm dedicating everything
Uh-huh.
to the black males. I definitely just had to talk about, I had to go off topic slightly
Yeah.
just now to just talk about just the stigma with us as a whole with therapy. But just going back to black men, obviously, because I'm dedicating them unto them. I know you, and I felt like the video was very poignant and just very transparent. Just what is the black man's value? If you could just go into what you discussed, for anyone that is listening, because like I said, this is a time right now where I feel like everyone just needs to feel like you said, it's okay to not be okay. And also to know that you are valued, you are important,
Hmm.
that you matter. So if you can just go into some of the points that you mentioned on the video for anyone that's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I did that video right after the morning after George Floyd was murdered. And,
Mm,
I learned of it. I don't scroll on social media a whole lot. I normally just check my notifications and I'm off, or I'll post something, then I'm off. And when I learned of it and read about it, it definitely hit me, to where I was definitely emotional. I was tired, I was angry, I was hurt, you know, and it came from a personal perspective because the week prior, I had lost, a family member. Um, she was murdered. Her fiance
mm.
murdered her and two of her kids. Um,
Oh my God.
Shot another one, and one of them got away. So I was
Mm,
still struggling with that grief, and then when this happened, it
mm,
kind of definitely took me over the edge. And I'm not one to do videos in a sense. I mean, I have a platform, but just personal videos, I don't do much of that on social media. So for me, it was definitely a transparent moment and a vulnerable moment. And then that vulnerability and just being transparent, I discussed, and my question was, what is a black man's value, in society? And, throughout the years and throughout history, we've built this, black people, we've, built this country the way it is, today. So we're the most valuable, but in the same token, we're the most hated. We're the most invaluable. You can take our life and it's nothing. You can put us away in cages and in jail
mm,
like it's nothing. And we hold the most percentage, as far as percentage wise, of a race that's incarcerated, and it's taking the value away from us. And the only reason why that value is being taken, because we are valuable. We are kings. We more than matter. We're essential. We've always been essential
mm,
workers. It's not just a quarantine thing. We're essential to the development and the success of our society, whether that's from an academic perspective, from a blue collar worker to athletics. We not only provide entertainment. We're the foundation, in which this, country has been built. It's been built on our backs and, our black queens as well. So my reflection was just to the masses. It wasn't just for black people, but it was for everyone to kind of understand what their value is and take ownership of that value, and not to allow another person's perspective to determine your value. You determine how valuable you are. And it was just one of those things where it wasn't scripted. It came
Mm-hmm.
straight from the heart, and I didn't look at it. I haven't looked at it since. So for me to kind of recite or recall what I actually said is very difficult, because I haven't looked back at it since. I
Mm-hmm.
may have
Mm-hmm.
replied to a comment or something like that, but I haven't looked back and to see exactly what I said, because I just wanted to be authentic, raw, and straight from the heart. But I know what what my focus was and what I was trying to convey in that, and understanding that we are who we are, and the only reason why that we're attacked the way that we are, if we wasn't valuable, we wouldn't be a second thought. We wouldn't be being killed the way we are, or we wouldn't be being marginalized the way that we are if we wasn't valuable, because other people see the value. They just don't want to say that we're valuable, because it'll make them feel less than or invaluable. So that was kind of like my whole point, my whole sentiment on that post, and it's still there. So if you want to check it out, you can definitely check it out.
So I want to, before we wrap everything up,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, this has just been an excellent conversation. I pray that, males in particular that tune in will listen to this and they'll pick up some nuggets. Like you said, several things that I just feel were so valuable and things that people really need to hear. So, my hope is that some men that do tune in and listen, like they listen and they pick up, hey, if they're experiencing some things, and I feel like we all walk around with trauma,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but if they're using numbing mechanism, because a lot of us do it, if they're using it as a coping mechanism, numbing things, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anger or sex or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be, I hope that they do listen to this and realize, hey, maybe I should speak to a professional. And on top of that, there is nothing wrong to speak to a professional, because I think that is just the main thing, just having that shame, I guess, or just feeling like, oh, I need help, or just thinking it's a sign of weakness. It's definitely not. It's actually a sign of strength
Mm-hmm.
when anyone acknowledges something that they, need some help or assistance with, and they want to fix it. That's always a good thing. So like I said, I definitely just wanted to just have some clear conversations with my brothers this month, because we definitely appreciate you guys. And I just wanted to definitely, and on behalf of myself and all my listeners, just let Black men know that you are essential. You are valuable. You are our kings, and we definitely need our kings, So I just wanted to give you guys that floor. Before we wrap it up, though, I would like you to just, for anyone that's listening, what would you like to say to any male that's going to be listening, just to give them some positive words,
Right.
just to speak some life into any males that's listening? Because obviously this is a very fragile time, but what would you like to close out this episode with for any male that's listening, just to speak some positivity into them?
Yeah, absolutely. For my guys, for my dudes, again, like we said before, it's okay not to be okay, and it doesn't make you less of a man to, seek help, to say that, that you're down, you're depressed, or you're anxious, or you're fearful, for your life. So many times we've, identified strength as being able to endure things, and go through life just enduring. And when you do that, you're not living to the best of your ability and your potential, because you're just enduring, you're just getting through. And one of my biggest things that I say all the time is that we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And so for all the guys, growing up, we definitely had OGs growing up. Well, in my neighborhood, in my neck of the woods, and in my age range, I had people that actually told me, if they saw something in me and they saw something in me that I don't need to be on the block, I don't need to be doing this, I need to focus on, academics, or, I was really good at football. So they protected me in a sense to not get involved in gangs or not to get involved in the drug game. We have to be those leaders, that's going to usher in, a new generation. A lot of the younger kids are lost, whether that's due to social media, lack of parenting, a lot of things, that contribute to that. So definitely be the change that you want to see, and it's okay not to be okay. And when you do feel like you don't have the answers, to resolve a particular situation internally as well as externally, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, you know what, there's someone out here that specializes in these particular things to assist me, and that doesn't make you less of a man at all. It actually shows that you are a man, and we all, come from a culture historically that, it was a village that helped raise us as
Mm.
children, and it still is a village as an adult that that we contribute to each other's wholeness and our overall wellness. So again, make sure that we're doing the necessary things to continue to contribute. Make sure we get our health screenings. Make sure that we're healthy first and foremost from a physical standpoint. Get your checkups. If you're over 40 like I am, get your necessary checkups. Get those prostates and all those things checked. So we can live more healthy lives and more prosperous lives and more fulfilling lives. So I'm all about mind, body, and soul. So make sure you tap into each one of those dimensions on a regular basis to make sure that you're balanced. I'm a Libra, so I'm big on I'm big on being balanced, and when I'm out of whack, I know that I'm out of whack. So self
Mm.
awareness is really important. And in order to know yourself, you got to be able to rid yourself of those things that's covering that's impacting the toxicity, the trauma, the dysfunction, being able to remove yourself from that to see who you are and understand who you are, not the dysfunction, not the trauma, not, what your family says you are, what your friends say you are, what society says you are. Understand who you are and be able to push towards that. And that should be a daily goal, to get to more to who you are. And
Mm.
just being healthy and just being happy and being at peace. We're not at peace, and I think this pandemic and what we're dealing with right now has allowed us to focus on what's important. First is us, then is everyone else, because if you're pouring from an empty cup, you're only going to pour in negativity into someone else. So make sure that your cup is full. Make sure that you're emotionally and physically healthy in order to pour into someone else. And
That is excellent. Thank you so much for just enlightening us. Like I said, I just really hope that people that listen, and even the females too, I'm sure there's a lot of things that, our queens will pick up from this conversation. But before we do end things, please let everyone that listens, where can they find you? Give everyone, all your contact information, your IG information, so people can look you up once they listen to this
for
episode.
sure. I can be reached at Damien, that's Dameon__ on Instagram. Also, you can follow me at the Couch 704 on Instagram as well. On Facebook, I'm the same. I'm Dameon without the underscore. So Damien Dash on Facebook, and the Couch 704 on Facebook as well. You can find me on Anchor. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me at DamienHarmon.com for speaking engagements, therapy, things of that sort, as well, and all your favorite podcast platforms. I'm around.
Thank you so much. So you guys heard him. So I want to thank him again. This is the creator and the host of the Couch 704, Mr. Damien Harmon, aka Damien Dash. And I just want everyone to please go follow him and look up his information, and then definitely, if you guys could just take away everything that he said, mental health is 100% important. I cannot stress it enough. I say it in so many of my episodes. Mental health is important. And especially now, if anything, during this whole pandemic and then during just seeing all this racial tension, if anything, I just hope every person that has listened to my show, with all this time that we have to reflect, that if anything, you realize how valuable you truly are. And I say this so much, as everyone knows, my big old platform is Go Love Yourself. Self love is the proponent to just conquer the world. If you have that self love, you'll be more aware of what you pour into your body, what you pour into your mind, and if you have that self love, you'll be more protective of just valuing yourself and just making sure that you also take care of yourself. And it's more than just physical. The mental is something that we have to look at more amongst our community so that we can be healed, healthy, whole, and strong. So, as I mentioned, I'm dedicating this month to my kings. I know I always say go queen, the privilege, the prize, and the package. But for my kings, you guys do have the pride, you have the power, you have the prestige. We need our kings. So I just want to dedicate this to you guys. We do love you all, and just please be safe and be strong. So thank you again, Damien. I really appreciate you for being on the
No
show.
problem. Thank you for having me. I definitely enjoyed myself.